Jimmy Butler was 13 years old when his mother looked him dead in the eye and said the words that would haunt him forever. "I don't like the look of you. You gotta go." It was a cold Tuesday morning in September 2002 in Tomball, Texas, and Londa Butler had just thrown her own son out of the house with nothing but the clothes on his back and a backpack full of broken dreams. Standing on that front porch, watching his mother close the door on his childhood, Jimmy made a promise that seemed impossible for a homeless teenager. "I'm gonna make it without you, and when I do, the whole world's gonna know my name." That night, sleeping on a park bench with nowhere to go, Jimmy Butler had no idea he would one day become an NBA champion, a multi-millionaire, and one of the most respected leaders in professional basketball. But this isn't just another rags to riches story. This is about a boy who turned abandonment into fuel, rejection into motivation, and homelessness into home. Before we dive into this incredible journey of survival and triumph, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will change how you think about family, loyalty, and what it really takes to make it in America. Jimmy Butler didn't just overcome the odds, he rewrote them completely. Londa Butler was a single mother raising 5 children in a small house in Tomball, a suburb northwest of Houston. The year was 2002, and America was still reeling from 9/11. The economy was struggling, and single mothers like Londa were fighting just to keep their heads above water. Money was tight, patience was thinner, and Jimmy, her middle child, had somehow become the target of all her frustrations. Maybe it was because he looked the most like his father, who had abandoned the family years earlier. Maybe it was because Jimmy had a mouth on him, always questioning, always pushing back, always demanding more attention than she had to give. Or maybe Londa Butler was just tired of being a mother to 5 kids when she could barely handle being a mother to 1. Whatever the reason, on that September morning in 2002, she made a decision that would echo through both of their lives forever. Jimmy had always been different from his siblings. While his brothers and sisters tried to stay invisible, blend into the background, avoid their mother's wrath, Jimmy stood out. He was loud, he was proud, and he refused to be ignored. At school, he was the class clown, the kid who made everyone laugh but went home to a house where laughter was rare and joy was rationed. The Butler household was a place where children were seen and not heard, where asking for things was met with frustration, and where love was conditional on behavior. Jimmy's father had left when Jimmy was just a baby, leaving Londa to raise 5 children on a waitress's salary and whatever government assistance she could qualify for. Basketball had become Jimmy's escape from the chaos at home. Every day after school, while his siblings did homework or chores, Jimmy would walk the 3 miles to the local community center and shoot until the lights went out. The gym was his sanctuary, the basketball his best friend, and the sound of the ball hitting the rim was the only music that made sense in his young life. He wasn't the tallest kid on the court, wasn't the fastest, wasn't even the most skilled, but he had something else, a fire in his belly that came from having nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Other kids played basketball for fun. Jimmy played basketball for survival. The signs had been there for months. Londa had been making comments about how Jimmy was too much trouble, how she couldn't handle him anymore, how he was just like his no-good father. His siblings saw it coming, but in families like theirs, survival was individual. You looked out for yourself first, everyone else second, and nobody warned Jimmy what was coming. That Tuesday morning in September started like any other. Jimmy got up at 6:30 a.m., took a cold shower because the hot water heater was broken again, got dressed in his school clothes that were too small and too old, and grabbed his backpack. But when he walked into the kitchen for breakfast, Londa was waiting for him with a look he'd never seen before. Cold, final, done. "Pack your stuff," she said, not looking up from her coffee. "You're leaving." Jimmy thought she was joking at first. Mothers don't just throw their kids out, right? That's what happens to other people, bad kids, kids who steal or do drugs or get in real trouble. Jimmy wasn't perfect, but he wasn't that kid either. He got decent grades, he stayed out of trouble, he didn't run with the wrong crowd. "What are you talking about?" he asked, still not understanding the gravity of the moment. "I'm tired of dealing with you," Londa replied, still not looking at him. "You're 13 now. You're old enough to figure it out on your own." The words hit Jimmy like a physical blow. He looked around the kitchen, waiting for someone to tell him this was a joke, a lesson, anything but reality. His 4 siblings were eating cereal, avoiding eye contact, pretending this wasn't happening. His mother continued making breakfast for everyone but him, as if he'd already disappeared. "But where am I supposed to go?" Jimmy asked, his voice cracking for the first time. The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy and toxic. "That's not my problem anymore," Londa said, and those 6 words changed Jimmy Butler's life forever. Jimmy stood there for a moment, processing what was happening. 13 years old, and his own mother was throwing him away like garbage. The woman who was supposed to love him unconditionally had just made her love very, very conditional, and he had failed to meet the conditions. "You got 30 minutes, Londa added, finally looking at him. "Then I want you gone." Jimmy went to his room, the room he shared with 2 brothers, and started packing. Everything he owned fit into a school backpack: 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, some underwear, a few school supplies, and his most prized possession, a worn-out Michael Jordan poster he'd found in a dumpster behind a sports store. 30 minutes later, Jimmy stood on the front porch with everything he owned. His mother handed him $47, money she'd found in various coat pockets around the house, and said, "Don't come back." Then she closed the door. No hug, no goodbye, no "I love you," no "I'll miss you." Just the sound of the lock clicking into place and the silence of abandonment. For the first week, Jimmy learned what survival really meant. He slept in parks, hiding behind trees when security guards made their rounds. He slept in 24-hour laundromats, pretending to wait for clothes that were never coming. He slept in the public library during the day, using studying as cover for napping. He used the $47 to buy food from gas station convenience stores, making it stretch as far as possible. Ramen noodles became a luxury meal, a candy bar was a feast, a bottle of water was a treasure. Jimmy learned to ration food like a soldier, to save every penny like a miser, to make every dollar count like his life depended on it. Because it did. School became his sanctuary. At least there, he had somewhere to be for 8 hours a day. He had access to bathrooms, water fountains, and if he was lucky, leftover food from the cafeteria. Teachers started noticing that Jimmy was wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row, that he was always first in line for lunch, that he lingered after classes ended like he had nowhere else to go. But Jimmy was good at hiding his situation. Pride runs deep when you're 13 and homeless. He made up stories about his mom working late, about staying with friends, about anything that would explain why he looked tired and hungry and scared. Basketball saved his life during those first weeks. Every evening, Jimmy would show up at the community center, and for those few hours on the court, nothing else mattered. Not where he was sleeping, not what he was eating, not the fact that his own mother had given up on him. On the basketball court, Jimmy Butler was somebody. That's where he met Jordan Leslie. Jordan was a classmate from Tomball High School who'd seen Jimmy at the community center every night, noticed that Jimmy never seemed to go home like everyone else, noticed that Jimmy's clothes were getting dirtier and his appearance was getting more desperate. One evening, after they'd played one-on-one until the gym closed at 10 p.m., Jordan asked the question that would change everything. "Hey man, You need a place to crash tonight. Jimmy's first instinct was to lie, to maintain the facade that everything was fine. But something in Jordan's voice, genuine concern, not pity, made him tell the truth. Yeah, Jimmy said quietly. I do. Jordan took Jimmy home that night to meet his family. The Leslie house was everything Jimmy's house hadn't been. Warm, welcoming, full of laughter and love. Jordan's mother, Michelle, took one look at this polite, respectful teenager and knew something wasn't right. When Jimmy finally told her his story, about being kicked out, about sleeping in parks, about his mother's rejection, Michelle Leslie made a decision that would restore Jimmy's faith in humanity. You're staying with us, she said simply, as long as you need to. For the first time in months, Jimmy cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Someone wanted him. Someone saw value in him. Someone was willing to take a chance on a kid who'd been thrown away. The Leslie family became Jimmy's first real family. Not by blood, but by choice. They gave him a bed, regular meals, and something even more valuable, the belief that he was worthy of love and care. But Michelle Leslie also understood that taking in a teenager was a big responsibility, and she couldn't do it alone forever. Over the next 4 years, Jimmy would live with 7 different families, each one opening their doors to a teenager who just needed someone to believe in him. The Leslies, the Lambers, the Jordans, the Smiths, the Browns, the Washingtons, and the Carters. These families became his chosen family, teaching him that love isn't about blood, it's about commitment. Each family taught Jimmy something different. The Leslies taught him about acceptance. The Lamberts taught him about hard work. Mr. Lambert was a construction worker who showed Jimmy that honest work was dignified work. The Jordans taught him about education. Both parents were teachers who made sure Jimmy understood that basketball was temporary, but knowledge was permanent. But living with different families also taught Jimmy something else. He couldn't depend on anyone forever. Every family was temporary. Every home was borrowed. Every situation was subject to change. If he was going to make something of himself, he had to do it on his own terms, with his own effort, through his own determination. Basketball became his obsession, his religion, his way out. At Tomball High School, Jimmy Butler was nobody special. He was 6 feet 2 inches, maybe 160 pounds, soaking wet, all arms and legs and awkward teenage energy. He wasn't getting college scholarship offers. He wasn't even starting varsity until his senior year. College scouts weren't calling his house because he didn't have a house to call. But what Jimmy lacked in natural talent, he made up for with something coaches rarely see: desperation. While other kids went to parties, Jimmy was in the gym shooting free throws. While other kids complained about practice, Jimmy asked for extra drills. While other kids had parents driving them to AAU tournaments, Jimmy took buses, begged for rides, did whatever it took to get seen. His high school coach, Mitch Herbert, saw something special in Jimmy, but it wasn't his jump shot or his speed or his natural athleticism. It was his motor. The thing inside him that never stopped running, never stopped pushing, never stopped demanding more. Jimmy played like his life depended on it, Coach Herbert would later say, because in his mind, it did. Jimmy understood something that his more privileged teammates didn't. Basketball wasn't just a game for him. It was his ticket out of poverty, his path to independence, his way to prove that being unwanted didn't mean being unworthy. Senior year, Jimmy averaged 18 points and 7 rebounds per game, good enough to catch the attention of some smaller colleges. But the Division I offers weren't coming. The big schools weren't calling. Jimmy Butler was going to have to take the long way to his dreams. That's when Tyler Junior College in East Texas offered him a chance. Not a full scholarship, not a guarantee of playing time, just an opportunity. For a kid who'd been sleeping on couches for 4 years, an opportunity was all he needed. Tyler Junior College wasn't Duke or Kentucky or North Carolina. It wasn't even close. The campus was small, the facilities were basic, and the competition was far from elite. But for Jimmy Butler, it was everything: a chance to play basketball, get an education, and prove that being unwanted didn't mean being unworthy. At Tyler JC, Jimmy transformed his body and his game. He spent hours in the weight room, adding 30 pounds of muscle to his skinny frame. He worked with trainers on his shooting mechanics, his ball handling, his footwork. He studied film like a graduate student, breaking down every possession, every play, every movement. But most importantly, he worked on his mind. Jimmy had always been mentally tough. You have to be when you're homeless at 13. But college basketball required a different kind of mental toughness: the ability to handle failure, to bounce back from mistakes, to stay confident even when things weren't going your way. Jimmy's junior college coach, Mike Marquise, became more than just a basketball mentor. He became the father figure Jimmy had never had. Coach Marquis taught Jimmy that talent without work ethic is wasted potential, but work ethic without talent can still take you places you never imagined. Jimmy wasn't the most talented player I ever coached, Marquis would later recall, but he was the most determined. He played every game like it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. After 2 years at Tyler JC, Jimmy had transformed himself into a legitimate Division I prospect. But by then, he was already 20 years old, older than most college freshmen. Time was running out, and Jimmy knew it. That's when Marquette University came calling. The Golden Eagles were taking a chance on a junior college transfer who was older than most prospects and had a complicated backstory. But Coach Buzz Williams saw something in Jimmy that others had missed: an unbreakable will to succeed. Marquette wasn't just giving Jimmy a scholarship, they were giving him a stage: the Big East Conference, national television games, March Madness, the chance to play against the best college players in the country. For a kid who'd been homeless at 13, it felt like he'd already made it. But Jimmy's first year at Marquette was a humbling experience. The speed of the game was different. The players were bigger, stronger, more skilled. Jimmy found himself on the bench more often than not, watching, learning, waiting for his opportunity. It came in his sophomore year. When injuries hit the team, Jimmy got his chance to start. What happened next surprised everyone, including Jimmy himself. He didn't just fill the role, he transformed it. Jimmy's defensive intensity became legendary on campus. He wasn't just playing basketball, he was playing like every possession mattered, like every steal could change his life. Because in his mind, it could. Other players played defense to prevent the other team from scoring. Jimmy played defense like he was defending his family, his future, his very existence. He dove for loose balls like they were made of gold. He took charges like they were acts of heroism. He guarded the best player on the other team like that player had personally insulted his mother, which, in a way, he had. Every opponent was a reminder of everyone who had doubted Jimmy, everyone who had given up on him, everyone who had said he wasn't good enough. By his junior year, Jimmy Butler was one of the best players in the Big East. His defensive prowess was matched by his improved offensive game. He'd worked tirelessly on his jump shot, his ball handling, his ability to create offense for himself and his teammates. But more than his individual skills, Jimmy had become a leader, not the vocal, rah-rah kind of leader, but the lead-by-example kind. He was always the first player in the gym and the last to leave. He studied film religiously. He treated every practice like it was the most important game of his life. His teammates began to understand that Jimmy Butler operated on a different level of intensity than everyone else. While they were playing college basketball, Jimmy was playing for his future, his independence, his chance to never again depend on anyone else's charity. By his senior year, NBA scouts were taking notice. Not because he was the most talented player in the draft, but because he was the most relentless. In a league full of talented players who didn't maximize their potential, Jimmy Butler represented something different: talent combined with an unbreakable work ethic. Draft night 2011 arrived like a judgment day. Jimmy had worked out for several teams, but he wasn't considered a lottery pick. He wasn't even considered a first-round lock. As the night wore on and names were called, Jimmy watched his dreams hanging in the balance. Finally, with the 30th pick in the first round, the very last pick of the first round, the Chicago Bulls called Jimmy Butler's name. The last pick of the first round, still getting overlooked, still being underestimated, still being told he wasn't quite good enough. Perfect. Jimmy Butler had spent his entire life proving people wrong. Why stop now? Jimmy's first few years in the NBA were a crash course in professional basketball reality. The Chicago Bulls already had established stars like Derrick Rose, the youngest MVP in NBA history, Joakim Noah, a defensive anchor, and Carlos Boozer, a veteran power forward. Jimmy was just the rookie from Marquette who might contribute if he was lucky. The Bulls were coming off a season where they'd won 62 games and reached the Eastern Conference Finals. They weren't looking for a savior, they were looking for a role player who could contribute without disrupting the established hierarchy. But Jimmy didn't see established stars when he looked at his teammates. He saw competition. He saw players who had been given things he'd had to fight for. He saw talent that wasn't being maximized, potential that wasn't being fulfilled, opportunities that weren't being seized. And that activated something primal in Jimmy Butler, the same survival instinct that had gotten him through sleeping in parks and living with 7 different families. In practice, Jimmy went at everyone. Veterans, stars, coaches, nobody was safe from Jimmy's intensity. He turned every drill into a competition, every scrimmage into a war, every moment into a test of will. Some teammates thought he was crazy. Others thought he was disrespectful. Jimmy didn't care. He'd been discarded once before by the person who was supposed to love him most. He wasn't going to let anyone in the NBA discard him without a fight. Slowly, coaches started noticing. Jimmy's defense was suffocating. His work ethic was contagious. His motor never stopped running. When Derrick Rose suffered his first major injury, Jimmy stepped up. When other players got comfortable, Jimmy stayed hungry. By his 3rd year, Jimmy Butler wasn't just a rotation player anymore. He was becoming the Bulls' most reliable player, and he was doing it the only way he knew how, by outworking everyone else in the building. The 2014-15 season was Jimmy's breakthrough. With Derrick Rose struggling with injuries, Jimmy became the Bulls' go-to player. He averaged 20 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 3.3 assists while playing All-NBA defense. He made his first All-Star team. He was named Most Improved Player of the Year. But more importantly, Jimmy was becoming a leader, not the rah-rah, give speeches kind of leader. The lead by example, never take a playoff kind of leader. The kind of leader you become when you've been abandoned and had to raise yourself. Jimmy's teammates started noticing that he was always the first one in the gym and the last one to leave. He was studying film when other players were going out to dinner. He was getting extra shots up when other players were playing video games. He was pushing himself when other players were resting. Jimmy played like every game might be his last, said teammate Pau Gasol, because in his mind, it might be. But Jimmy's intensity came with a cost. He wasn't just demanding excellence from himself, he was demanding it from everyone around him. And not everyone appreciated Jimmy's approach to leadership. Tensions started building in Chicago. Some players felt like Jimmy was too hard on them, too demanding, too intense. Some coaches felt like Jimmy was too vocal about what needed to change, too willing to challenge authority. Some front office executives felt like Jimmy was becoming a problem rather than a solution. Jimmy saw it differently. He'd spent his whole life around people who were comfortable with mediocrity, comfortable with making excuses, comfortable with giving up. He'd been raised by a woman who gave up on him when things got difficult. He'd been discarded by the person who was supposed to love him unconditionally. He refused to be around that energy anymore. He refused to accept anything less than maximum effort from himself and his teammates. He refused to pretend that losing was acceptable as long as everyone was comfortable. This led to friction with some of his younger teammates, particularly players who had been handed opportunities that Jimmy had to fight for. When Jimmy called out effort or attitude, some players took it personally. When Jimmy demanded accountability, some players felt attacked. But Jimmy wasn't trying to be mean or difficult. He was trying to win. And winning, in his mind, required everyone to care as much as he did, to work as hard as he did, to sacrifice as much as he did. The problem was, not everyone had been homeless at 13. Not everyone had been abandoned by their mother. Not everyone understood that basketball was about more than just playing a game. In 2017, the Chicago Bulls traded Jimmy Butler to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The official reason was philosophical differences. The real reason was that Jimmy Butler had become too honest for an organization that preferred comfortable lies. Minnesota was supposed to be Jimmy's fresh start, a young, talented team with players like Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins who just needed veteran leadership to take the next step. Jimmy was excited about the opportunity to build something special with players who had unlimited potential. But Jimmy quickly realized that not every talented player has the drive to maximize their talent. Some players are content being good when they could be great. Some players are satisfied with individual success when they could have team success. Some players are comfortable with losing as long as their personal statistics look good. Jimmy Butler had never been comfortable with any of those things. The 2017-18 season started well. With Jimmy's leadership and intensity, the Timberwolves made the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. Jimmy was playing the best basketball of his career, averaging 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists while anchoring the defense. For a moment, it looked like he'd found his basketball home. Then came the infamous practice. In October 2018, after requesting a trade from Minnesota, Jimmy showed up to practice and dominated a scrimmage while playing with the third-string players against the starters. He was making a point that he could still be the best player on the court even when surrounded by lesser talent. The practice became legendary in NBA circles. Jimmy had essentially called out his teammates, his coaches, and his organization in the most public way possible. Some people called it unprofessional. Jimmy called it honest. "You need me," he told his teammates that day. "You can't win without me." He was right. But being right isn't always enough. The Philadelphia 76ers traded for Jimmy Butler in November 2018. Philadelphia was a city that appreciated hard work, blue-collar values, and players who weren't afraid to speak their minds. Jimmy fit in immediately. Playing alongside Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, Jimmy helped lead the 76ers to the second round of the playoffs. In the series against the Toronto Raptors, Jimmy played some of the best basketball of his career. In Game 4, he scored 39 points to force a Game 5. In that deciding game, his shot at the buzzer rimmed out, sending the Raptors to the conference finals. But Jimmy's time in Philadelphia was always going to be temporary. When his contract expired, the 76ers had to make a choice: pay Jimmy the max contract he deserved, or let him walk to preserve salary cap flexibility. They chose to let him walk. It was a familiar feeling for Jimmy Butler, being unwanted, being discarded, being told he wasn't worth the investment. That's when the Miami Heat called. Pat Riley, the Heat's president, had built a culture in Miami based on hard work, accountability, and no shortcuts. It was everything Jimmy Butler represented. When they met, Riley told Jimmy something no other team had. We don't want you to change. We want you to be exactly who you are. For the first time since he was 13 years old, Jimmy Butler felt truly wanted. Today, Jimmy Butler is living proof that your beginning doesn't determine your ending. The kid who was kicked out at 13 became an NBA champion in spirit, a multi-millionaire in reality, and a role model for every child who's ever felt unwanted, unloved, or unworthy. Jimmy's story isn't finished. He's still playing at an elite level, still leading by example, still proving that being abandoned doesn't mean you're alone. He's built the family he never had, created the love he was denied, and provided the stability he never knew. Most importantly, Jimmy Butler proved that the family you choose is often stronger than the family you're born into, that the love you earn is more valuable than the love you're given, and that sometimes the people who hurt you most give you the greatest gift of all, the determination to prove them wrong. If this story inspired you to never give up on your dreams, no matter who gives up on you, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're worthy of love, success, and happiness. Remember, being unwanted by some people just means you're exactly what the right people are looking for.